Muchas gracias, Gina. Mr. President, Dr. Roses, distinguished and honorable ministers of Health of the Americas, delegates to the Directing Councils, colleagues and friends. First, let me thank you, Dr. Roses, for the kind invitation for my participation in this historical session. It brings memories of a life of work and of so many colleagues that have contributed to the improvement of the health of the Americas in the last 30 years. This award will make me cry, as I told you. We just heard from Dr. Henderson the tremendous contribution that the Smallpox Eradication Program provided to the health delivery systems throughout the world and the impact that it has had in the development of other disease control programs. The region of the Americas has been a beacon of innovation over the last 30 years, and undoubtedly many of its successes have its origin in the smallpox program. The Americas launched the Expanded Program on Immunization, the EPI, in 1977, and I had the privilege to have been involved with it since its inception. I was coming from Ethiopia, where I was the chief epidemiologist for the Smallpox Eradication Program in that country from 70 to 76, after my participation in the program in my native country of Brazil in the late 60s. The experience at the outset of the API program in the Americas was a total innovation at the time. It was the first time that the program was being organized with the full participation and engagement of the directing bodies of the organization. The Directing Council actually had appointed an ad hoc committee of its subcommittee, of its executive committee, to prepare the background documents and feasibility for the implementation of such program. At that time, this was not usual. The ad hoc committee was comprised of 3 individuals, respectively from the governments of Costa Rica, the United States, and Trinidad and Tobago. The Secretariat had then formed a task force, again, for the first time, comprised of members of all technical and administrative units of the organization to support this ad hoc committee of the executive committee. And I was appointed the secretary of the task force. One issue that made this work so enjoyable and productive was the collegiality of the members of the task force, as well as the full engagement of the members of the ad hoc committee. Among the various issues that were included in the work of the ad hoc committee, besides those related to which vaccines to be included in the program, which strategies should the program follow, what should be the organization of the surveillance systems, and what were the issues related to resources, both human and financial, and then a topic related to vaccine availability, procurement, and supply. This last topic was critical because as countries had requested the Secretariat to study the feasibility of organization of a revolving fund for vaccine procurement. As I was informed at that time, this request had come directly from the members of the Directing Council. And until today, I could not find out who was the originator of that idea. Nevertheless, I want to pay tribute to 2 individuals that, in my opinion, had a lot to do with that. They were Pedro Acha, an outstanding Peruvian veterinary that was the chief of the Division of Disease Control and Prevention at that time, and Carl Western, then the chief of Communicable Diseases unit within that division. These 2 individuals, under the leadership of Hector Acuña, then the director of PAHO, were the main force responsible for the initiation of the EPI and the revolving fund in the Americas. It was therefore the responsibility of the ad hoc committee to establish the mechanisms and modus operandi of the fund, as well as the identification of its level of capitalization and sources of funding. The procurement mechanisms were worked out in detail by then Chief of Procurement of PAHO, Walter Umstead, who worked in tandem with John Hunter in the Finance Department and with the Legal Office to set the modus operandi, rules and regulations in regards to the operation of the fund. Regarding procurement aspects, contracts with the suppliers, repayment schedule by the countries, and so on. The decision was then made that a 3% surcharge should be put on the cost of the vaccine, not as a service charge or an overhead, but as a capitalization fee. Therefore, that whenever the countries would buy the vaccine, they would pay a 3% additional to the cost of the vaccine, and this would be part of the capitalization of the fund. As you know, actually, from the financial reports of PAHO to you every year, the fund started with a capitalization of about $1 million in '79 and grew to over $30 million when I retired in 2002, and as I understand, over $40 million today. This may be the only fund in the UN system that, besides providing an incredible service to countries, also increased its capitalization. Many other funds went bust over the years. At the end, the revolving fund was established as a technical cooperation mechanism in which the Secretariat acts as the procurement agents for all participation countries for their purchase of vaccines and related supplies. Payments are accepted in local currency whenever PAHO and the UN system can absorb that local currency in any given country at any given time. As for the initial capitalization, there are some interesting anecdotes that I want to share with you. First, when we proposed that $1 million be transferred from the working capital fund of PAHO to initiate its capitalization, James Milan, then the chief of budget, wrote to the director that this proposal was an absurd, in capital letters. Well, at the end, our proposal prevailed. The directing council accepted, and the transfer was made, and James became actually a major supporter of the program and of the revolving fund. Subsequently, Mark Schneider, then the policy advisor to the director and the former staff of Senator Ted Kennedy, worked with the US Congress to allocate $1 million to the fund. The Congress issued the directive to USAID authorizing the contribution, which of course AID was not very happy because it had been bypassed. Schneider had bypassed the idea and went direct to the Congress. Later on, UNICEF and the Dutch government pitched $500,000 each, and some other member states also contributed other amounts. Of interest was that there were some private individual donations, and most interestingly, the children of Lions clubs in Trinidad and Tobago washed cars and sold cake in the streets, raised $1,000 and donated to the fund. These various contributions raised the capital of the fund to about $4 million in its first 3 years of operation, and from then onwards, the growth of the capital was due to the capitalization fee of 3%. The revolving fund, therefore, became the major innovative instrument of the EPI in the Americas, and from one side, it was based on the basic principles that created your organization: Pan-Americanism, solidarity, and equity, allowing for all countries to work together, and because of economies of scale, PAHO can obtain affordable prices equal to all countries in the region. From the other side, vaccine manufacturers can plan their production in a more predictable way, as they are ensured that the PAHO countries will purchase the vaccine and payments will be done timely. They can also plan for major capital investments, which was actually done in the mid-'80s, in which basically all vaccine manufacturers made major investments to renovate or expand production plants. Additionally, and most importantly, countries became less dependent on foreign financial assistance. Over these last 30 years, the contribution of national budgets to national immunization programs went from less than 50% to over 95% at the present time. Even the poorest countries in the region are able to pay all or part of their immunization programs. The Americas became the leader in the implementation of immunization programs and the introduction of new vaccines, shortening the time of introduction from development to utilization in the field. It was the first region to introduce the MMR vaccine, and in less than 5 years from the development of the pentavalent vaccine, almost all countries had introduced this vaccine into their national programs. Rotavirus vaccine, one of the newest vaccines in the market, has already been introduced in more than 17 countries, and pneumococcal vaccine in more than 7 countries. The same with the seasonal flu vaccine. The result so far was the control of the most common vaccine-preventable diseases and the eradication of some of those, as was mentioned before, polio, measles, rubella, congenital rubella syndrome. Looking back, were it not for the revolving fund, this progress would not have been achieved. And so, it has been for the last 30 years. I understand that at this point in time, there are some who are contesting the validity of the modus operandi of the revolving fund. The vaccine market grew from about $5 billion 5 or 6 years ago to over $27 billion last year. Therefore, it's clear that there are many commercial interests at play. Those in charge of policies at the public sector, you, the Directing Council, have to keep in mind the impact that vaccine pricing policies have in their vaccination programs and the impact that this can have in your efforts to improve the health of the population through the use of vaccines. As we look at the future of vaccination programs in the developing world, I see the need for mechanisms such as or similar to the PAHO revolving fund in order for populations to accrue the benefit from the technologies developed due to the progress of science. And as Albert Sabin, the patron of our institute, used to say, and I quote, "A scientist," and I add, "or public health decision maker, cannot rest while the products of science and technology remains in the shelves," end of quote. So as we look into the future, it's now up to you to take the responsibility from those visionaries of the 70s to ascertain what's better for your countries and for the region as a whole, always have in mind the basic principles that created your organization and your revolving fund for vaccine procurement. In fact, in 1981, together with Walt Umstead and Peter Carrasco, who is here today, another individual that greatly contributed to the success of the fund, we published the paper that had the title, "Why Not a Revolving Fund in All WHO Regions?" Actually, the Eastern Mediterranean region and the African regions are now studying the possibility of initiating similar system of bulk procurement, almost 30 years later. I always think that if such mechanisms were established at that time, countries would be today less dependent on external support to their vaccination programs in other regions, and in turn, their programs would be more sustainable as those that you have today here in the region of the Americas. We will be judged by future generations by the way we treat our children today. It's now incumbent upon all of you to set the stage for the future of your programs, as many more vaccines will come into your hands in the near future in what I predict will be known as the century of vaccines. I am sure that the region of the Americas, under your leadership, will continue to break ground and be the example and model for other regions of the world in their pursuit to protect their children against vaccine-preventable diseases. Thank you very much.